The kindest people often suffer the most, not because they're weak, but because they've abandoned themselves. Stay until the end, and you'll discover why your kindness became a survival strategy and how to finally break free.
The kindest person you know is probably also the most exhausted person you know. You've seen it 100 times without ever really questioning why. The friend who has never once said no to you. The coworker who stays late, covers shifts, smooths over conflicts that were never hers to fix. The relative who spends every holiday managing everyone else's mood so the day can stay pleasant, and goes home afterward feeling like something was taken out of her. You call this a virtue. The people around you call it character. Carl Jung called it something colder. He believed that kindness, in the form most of us actually practice it, usually isn't a decision at all. It's a strategy that stopped feeling like one so long ago you mistook it for your personality. So ask yourself something uncomfortable before this goes any further. What if the warmth people love you for was never generosity? What if it's just fear wearing a nicer outfit, not compassion, camouflage? Notice how fast you flinched at that word. Something in you wants to argue with it immediately, to list every genuine moment of care you've ever offered someone as proof this doesn't apply to you. That instinct is the clue, not the defense. People don't argue with a compliment that fast. They argue with something closer to the truth than they'd like it to be. Here's a small moment to hold on to for the rest of this. Someone asks what you want for dinner, which movie you'd pick, what you actually think about a decision that only affects you. And there's a strange half-second delay before you answer. Sometimes the delay wins completely, and you hear yourself say, "I don't mind. Whatever you want," about something you had a strong opinion on 20 minutes ago before anyone was watching. That gap between what you feel and what you say is where this entire story lives. Every, "of course I don't mind," and every, "it's really not a big deal," is built on top of that gap. And underneath it, there's a version of you that has been quietly disappearing for years. This isn't a video about becoming less kind. It's about finding out what your kindness has actually been paying for and who's been collecting. Think about the last time you agreed to something you didn't want to do. Not the reason you gave out loud, the half second before you gave it. There was a flicker there, a tightening, a voice that said no, followed immediately by a mouth that said, "Of course." Most people never catch that half second, because catching it requires you to slow down a habit you've been running on autopilot since before you could read. That's the habit this video is actually about. Not the favors, not the late nights, not the apologies stacked on top of apologies. The half second underneath all of it, where a decision gets made so fast you never even notice you were the one making it. It didn't start in adulthood. It started somewhere so early you have no language for it and no memory of agreeing to anything. But an agreement was made. A child raised in a house where affection has conditions learns the terms almost immediately. Never through words, through consequence. Disagree and the temperature in the room drops. Want something and you become inconvenient. Show anger, even normal 5-year-old anger, and the person you depend on for survival goes cold, or leaves the room, or gives you a look you spend the rest of your life trying not to earn again. So the child does what anything built for survival does. It adapts. If I stay quiet, I get to stay. If I never disappoint the people who feed me, I get to belong. If I make myself endlessly useful, no one has a reason to leave. If I feel my feelings quietly enough, no one has to deal with them. You didn't build a personality in that house. You built a treaty. And the clause buried in the fine print reads something like this: "I will abandon myself on the condition that everyone else promises not to abandon me." Nobody says this out loud. Nobody has to. Children don't need language to learn the rules that keep them fed and held. By the time you're old enough to actually choose anything, the choosing has already been done for you by a version of yourself who didn't know there was another option. Old doesn't mean over either. That treaty renews itself every time you say yes to something you didn't actually want to do. Every unreturned favor you let slide. Every plan you agreed to because objecting felt like too much of a risk. Every time you told someone you were fine when the true answer would have cost you more courage than you had available that day. You can see the treaty most clearly in the moments that don't add up on paper. Why you feel guilty resting when no one asked you to work. Why someone else's plain no feels like rejection, while your own yes feels like the toll you pay to stay wanted. Why you can rehearse a difficult conversation for an hour in your head and still say something completely different out loud. Something softer, safer, further from what you actually meant. None of this is a character flaw. It's a system built for a smaller, more dependent version of you, still running in a body that no longer needs it to survive. What makes it so hard to spot is that it never announced itself as a decision. Nobody sat you down at 6 years old and asked whether you'd like to trade your anger for safety. It happened in 1,000 tiny moments that individually meant nothing. A raised eyebrow, a sigh, a door closed a little harder than it needed to be. Your nervous system was cataloging all of it long before your mind had the words for what it was learning. And by the time you were old enough to notice the pattern, you were already fluent in it. That's the part worth sitting with. You didn't choose this the way you choose a job or a haircut. You absorbed it the way you absorbed your first language, without ever remembering the moment you didn't know it yet. Jung had a name for the identity built to survive being watched. He called it the persona, and it isn't exactly a lie. It's closer to a costume, built out of whatever the people around you seem to need from you. You wore it so early and so constantly that at some point you stopped experiencing it as a costume at all. It became your face, the helper, the peacemaker, the one who reads a room before anyone else does and quietly rearranges herself to keep it calm. Watch what happens to your relationships once that role is fully installed. Friends stop asking how you are and start asking what you can do for them. Family stops noticing your presence and starts depending on your function. At work, you become the person everyone brings their unfinished tasks to because you always finish them. In love, you become the partner who keeps adjusting again and again because adjusting is what you've always done. And stillness feels like abandonment waiting to happen. People start describing you as easy, low maintenance, dependable, a rock, and you're supposed to feel proud of the description. Sit with what those words actually mean. None of them are observations about who you are. All of them are reports on how useful you've been. And usefulness, unlike love, expires. It has to be renewed constantly, or the affection attached to it starts to fade. So you keep performing. You keep saying yes a half second before you've even asked yourself if you want to. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being well-liked for a version of yourself you didn't fully choose. You can be surrounded at a party, praised at work, needed constantly by people who say they love you, and still go home at night with the distinct sense that no one in the room actually knows you. That isn't paranoia, it's arithmetic. If the version of you that shows up is curated for other people's comfort, then the affection you're collecting was never quite aimed at you in the first place. It was aimed at the role. The problem was never that you built a mask. The problem is that nobody ever told you it was allowed to come off. And the more convincing the mask becomes, the less anyone, including you on most days, can find the face underneath it. Here's the part that's easy to miss because it doesn't look like a problem from the outside. The persona works. That's exactly why it's so hard to put down. It gets you invited places. It gets you praised in performance reviews. It gets you chosen as the person people confide in, lean on, and call first. Every reward you've ever gotten for being agreeable is real, which means every incentive to keep being agreeable is real too. Nobody quits a strategy that's still paying out even when the cost of running it never shows up on the same statement as the reward. Everything the persona wasn't allowed to include didn't disappear. It went somewhere. Jung called that somewhere the shadow. Every time you swallowed your anger to keep a room peaceful, it didn't evaporate, it relocated. Every time you silenced a preference because voicing it felt selfish, it didn't vanish, it went into storage. Ambition you decided was arrogant. Boundaries you decided were unkind. Desire you decided was too much, too demanding, too inconvenient for the people around you. Even ordinary self-interest, the kind that has nothing to do with cruelty, got filed into the same place because somewhere along the way, you stopped being able to tell healthy self-interest apart from selfishness at all. And the shadow doesn't stay still just because you've stopped looking at it. It grows in the dark, quietly without asking your permission, and eventually it starts finding its way out through cracks you don't recognize as belonging to it at all. The sarcasm with a little too much edge on it. The explosion out of nowhere over a dish left in the sink. A text left unanswered. That was never really about the dish or the text. The sudden numbness in the middle of a conversation with someone you love, where you're nodding, present in body, and somewhere else entirely. A quiet, persistent envy of people who say no easily. The ones you've secretly started to resent for having a boundary you never let yourself build. Recognize any of that. Sometimes it doesn't even show up as behavior. It shows up as a tightness in your jaw you can't account for, or sleep that doesn't restore you because some part of you stayed on watch through the night, still managing a room that isn't there. It would be easy to read all of this as evidence that something is wrong with you, that you're becoming bitter or unstable, or losing the person your kindness built. That reading is wrong. You don't explode because you're secretly an angry person. You explode because you spent years convincing everyone, including yourself, that you weren't. The shadow was never trying to destroy the identity you built. It was trying to get your attention in the only language available to something that's been ignored for that long. And here's the paradox underneath all of it. The kinder your persona becomes, the more dangerous your shadow grows. Because every ounce of selfishness, anger, and desire you refuse to integrate doesn't disappear. It waits for a moment weak enough to leak through, usually with someone who least deserves it, over something that has nothing to do with what actually caused it. This is why the people who get hurt by your shadow are so rarely the people who caused it. The co-worker who took credit for your idea gets your smile. Your partner at 11 at night over a dish in the sink gets the reaction that co-worker actually earned. That's not a coincidence, and it's not a character defect. It's just where the pressure happened to find an exit. The shadow doesn't aim. It leaks toward whoever is safe enough to leak on, which almost always means whoever loves you enough to still be standing there afterward. At some point, if you're fortunate, or maybe just worn down enough, something in you starts to shift. You say no to a request you'd normally have absorbed without a second thought. You let a silence sit in a conversation instead of rushing in to fill it with reassurance. Maybe it's small. You don't answer a message the same day it arrives. You leave a gathering an hour earlier than expected. You tell someone, plainly, that a plan doesn't work for you, without stitching an apology to the edges of it first. And something happens that nobody warns you about in advance. The people closest to you do not celebrate this. A few of them get quietly uncomfortable. One or two get openly cold. Somebody you've known for years might get, unexpectedly, furious over something that on paper was reasonable and small. It's tempting to read this as proof you've done something wrong, that you've become selfish or difficult or unkind. You haven't. What's actually happening is simpler and colder than that. The relationship was never built around who you actually are. It was built around what you would silently tolerate. Remove the tolerance, and the whole architecture holding that relationship together collapses because it was never load-bearing to begin with. People aren't losing you in this moment. They're losing the version of you that never made a single demand on them. Some of them won't miss you at all. They'll miss how easy you were to manage. Let that sentence sit for a second. The people who benefit most from your persona are rarely villains. Most of them are just the people who trained you to be convenient and then called it your personality without ever meaning to, without ever noticing they'd done it. They got used to the convenience of a version of you that never asked for anything back. And convenience, once it becomes comfortable, never asks what it's costing someone else. Picture the specific moment. You decline an invitation you would have accepted a year ago. And instead of the relief you expected, you get a message back that stings, something clipped, something with an edge you weren't prepared for. Your first instinct will be to fix it, to call, to explain, to soften the no you already gave until it disappears entirely and the old arrangement quietly resumes. That instinct is the treaty trying to renew itself in real time. Recognizing it while it's happening is most of the work. It helps to understand why the people around you react this way, because it isn't usually malice. Most people build their sense of a relationship on whatever pattern repeats often enough to feel reliable. If the pattern was you absorbing, adjusting, and rarely asking for anything, that pattern became their baseline for who you are, and baselines feel like facts. When you deviate from it, even by an inch, it doesn't register to them as you finally showing up. It registers as something breaking. That reaction isn't proof you're doing something wrong. It's proof the old baseline is exactly as fragile as it always was, just untested until now. Jung never suggested the answer was to become less kind. That would just be another performance dressed up as growth. What he suggested was colder and more precise. Stop needing to be kind in order to feel safe. That distinction is the entire difference between a persona and an actual person. Start with this. Over the next several days, notice every single moment where saying yes produces an immediate flicker of resentment, even a small one, before you finish the sentence out loud. Don't judge the flicker, just notice it, the way you'd notice weather. That flicker is information. It's showing you exactly where the old treaty is still quietly running the terms of your life and which relationships are still being financed by it. Then try this. Choose one emotion you automatically shut down the instant it appears. Anger, envy, disappointment, whatever the one is for you, and let yourself feel it completely, once, without immediately narrating it as evidence of a character flaw while it's happening. Just the feeling, uninterrupted, unedited, and unpunished. Notice how quickly the instinct arrives to apologize for feeling it at all, and let that instinct go unanswered, just this once. The hardest one is this. Practice saying no without a defense built into it. No explanation trailing behind it to soften the blow. No apology stitched to the edges to make it easier for the other person to receive. Just the word, allowed to stand there on its own, complete, without you managing how it lands. You'll notice something uncomfortable the first few times you try any of this. It will feel less like relief and more like guilt. That's expected. Guilt is simply what the old treaty feels like when you stop paying it on time. None of these will feel like growth while you're doing them. They'll feel closer to betrayal because for years the persona convinced you that its survival and your worth were the same thing. They aren't. They were never the same thing. One was a strategy, the other is you. None of these three practices require an audience. You don't need to announce to anyone that you're changing, and you probably shouldn't, because the version of this that turns into a speech to the people around you is usually the persona finding a new way to manage their reaction in advance. This is quieter than that. It happens in the half second before you answer a text. In the moment you catch yourself starting to explain a decision nobody asked you to justify. In the beat where you let a no exist without immediately checking the other person's face to see how it landed. Small and private and repeated is what actually rewires a pattern this old. Not a single dramatic confrontation, but 100 tiny refusals to sign the same treaty again. There's a version of you a decade from now who either did this work or didn't, and the difference between those two people is larger than it feels like it should be from where you're standing today. The one who didn't is still fluent in the old language, still delivering a half-second delay before every honest answer, still mistaking exhaustion for love and calling it devotion. She's not unhappy exactly. She's just quietly unavailable to her own life, present for everyone else's, a guest in her own house. The one who did this work isn't unrecognizable. She still helps people, still shows up, still has the same warmth that made her easy to love in the first place. The only difference is where that warmth comes from. It stopped being rent paid on a fear of abandonment and became something she actually owns, something she can give away without going into debt to do it. Nobody else in her life will ever see the moment that changed. It won't be a single dramatic scene. It will be 1,000 small refusals to keep paying a bill that was never actually hers. None of this ends with you becoming cold, distant, or someone who stops caring about the people around them. Integration was never about being less kind. It was about being kind on purpose, instead of by default. There's a difference, and it's not a small one, between kindness that flows because you have nothing to lose by giving it, and kindness that flows because you're afraid of what happens the moment you stop. One of those is generosity. The other is a debt you've been quietly repaying since childhood, with interest that never stops compounding. The strongest people you'll ever meet were probably never the nicest people in the room. They were simply the ones whose warmth didn't come attached to an invoice. Their kindness cost them nothing to withdraw because it was never a payment to begin with. It was just something they had and chose to give. That's the whole difference. Not less warmth. Warmth with nothing riding on it. You will still help people. You will still show up, still listen, still give more than your share sometimes because that's who you are. Not because the alternative feels like disappearing. The difference will be almost invisible from the outside and unmistakable from the inside. You'll notice it the first time you say yes to something and feel nothing shift in your stomach while you say it. No flicker. No quiet resentment being filed away for later. Just a choice made by someone who could just as easily have said no. That's what Jung meant by wholeness, not the absence of a shadow, the end of being ruled by one you refuse to look at. The day your kindness becomes something you choose freely, with nothing riding on it, instead of something you owe just to be allowed to stay, is the day you stop disappearing from your own life. Not because you became someone harder, because you finally stopped negotiating.
The moment kindness becomes a choice instead of a necessity, your real life finally begins. If this changed how you see yourself, subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts below. I'll see you next time.